Welcome to the Lensrentals podcast. I'm Ryan Hill, and this week we've got an interview with Drew MacCallum, a technical information advisor at Canon USA. Our blog editor, Zach, will be asking about the new RF mount flagship EOS R5, and Roger, our optical expert, will get all the information he can about new and upcoming RF mount lenses. Here are Roger and Zach.
Welcome to the Lensrentals podcast. I'm Zach Sutton, and we're here today with, of course, Roger Cicala, as well as Drew MacCallum. Drew MacCallum is a technical information advisor for Canon USA. Thanks so much for joining us, Drew.
Oh, thanks for having me. This is awesome. Love to be on this show with you guys.
Let's just kind of start with your experience. I've met you, several times now over at various trade shows and stuff, and you've always sort of been known, at least within the media circle, as like the guy that knows everything for Canon cameras and lenses. Tell us a little bit about what you do for Canon.
Well, Zach and Roger, I feel a few different roles here as a technical advisor. I've worked with you guys in the media as far as launching new products, and that's one of my main roles is to work with Canon Inc. in Japan, take the information that they've provided us and launch that new product out to the marketplace, work with our marketing teams, work with our social teams, and help figure out how we're going to put this out in the market so that customers know about it and can learn as much as they can. The other side of it is the research and feedback to Canon Inc. So I do a lot of information gathering at various shows and seminars, or we do a lot of interviews with photographers and end users all over the country here in the US, trying to figure out what is it that someone wants next. And we take a lot of that information and feed it back to Japan for each product segment. Maybe it's a new lens, maybe it's a new feature. Maybe it's something very specific like, a wireless workflow that has, we're seeing a lot of new changes to things like that. That's a lot of research that we've been doing here in the States and help feed that back to Canon Inc. as a marketing company here in the US. And of course, doing interviews and fun things like this with you guys out there and providing the knowledge from the Canon, inside as much as we can. So I'll love to do things like this.
So what you're saying is that at any point, Roger and I can just start pitching you product ideas during this podcast.
You wouldn't be the first, that's for sure.
Well, very cool. Obviously, you guys just launched the EOS R5 camera system, and it has been a huge talking point within the industry. So let's just jump into it and let's just talk about the EOS R5. Rumors started for this camera back in January. I remember, kind of hearing buzzes about it on different rumors websites and different publications and stuff like that. And then I believe you guys announced that you guys were in development with it in February.
Right. Yeah. Right. We do development announcements often to kind of let the market know where we're going, what we're doing, give them a little bit of insight as to what's coming down the pike. Not with a lot of details, I know, for some sadness too many, but it does give you an idea or a tease of what we're working on.
From at least what I've read, and obviously I'm kind of reading unofficial reports, but it sounds like this camera was initially meant to be launched around the Summer Olympics, which of course have been postponed for the next year.
Yeah, the COVID situation was a global impact to everything under the sun, and the timing and all. We don't go into when and where and how we were trying to do things, but of course everything was impacted by it. So we were able to launch the product in a slightly different manner in ways we've not done before in a actual virtual launch, using everybody online, working from home, doing videos and everything right from home. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think all people within the industry are looking at ways to, streamline that virtual world since we all can't be crowded in the same room right now. But yeah, it seems like you guys had a successful launch. The camera itself is released now. It's starting to make its way to the shelves now. And as for specs, just to kind of run down the list, it is a 45 megapixel full frame sensor, 12 frames per second shooting speed, 1,053 focus points across the entire sensor plane, I believe, dual pixel autofocus. The big news is, of course, that it has 5-axis in-body image stabilization. And then, of course, the biggest news is that the camera is capable of shooting 8K 30 frames RAW and 4K 120 10-bit internal video. Is there anything I'm missing on it?
Well, there's so much to this camera. We added a lot of functions and features that customers were asking for. The autofocus system alone is more than just that 1053 autofocus zones. Now, when we say that 1053 focus points, it's actually just the zones. There's more than 4,000 autofocus points in this camera, but it's the zones that are really the active working pieces here that are tracking a moving subject in servo and letting the eye tracking and all that work. But realistically, the autofocus system is a huge benefit to how this camera was developed, and some of the benefits why you would look into something like this.
I remember speaking to you shortly after the EOS R released. We were in New York together, and we had kind of talked about the RF platform. And I believe even back then I had mentioned, like, is in-body image stabilization going to be a thing on this platform? And I think your response was, if it seems that the market wants that and they're interested in it, it's something that we would be including in our camera bodies going forward. So it's exciting to see that you guys have fulfilled that. In regards to the R5, is this Canon going all in on the EOS platform?
Well, the two systems live side by side. When I say the two systems, I mean the EOS DSLR and the mirrorless system. We don't really say one's replacing the other, simply because there are customers that still enjoy and want that optical viewfinder. They want that heavier camera body. They want that traditional feel of the DSLR. So are we all in on mirrorless? Yes, and we have been since the R announcement and the RP, and we are developing, like we said in the announcement for the R. This is our next 30 plus years of the EOS system as a whole. This camera platform just happened to be a mirrorless platform as we moved into what was needed next to increase the technology that we wanted to see.
For me personally, I shoot DSLR right now, and with the R, I've used the R multiple times for multiple shoots. And for a lot of people, it does seem like it is the big push to move from the DSLR market over to the EOS R platform. That said, obviously rumors are everywhere in the camera industry, in the photo industry. We are still slowly getting units out now, so people are just now getting their hands on it. But there is one rumor that I would love to discuss that I've seen on a couple different reviews, and that is the rumor of overheating when shooting 8K on this camera. Is that something that you're able to address?
You know what? I won't address this as a rumor per se. And when we announced the R5 with 8K capabilities, and we put it out there that in 8K there are going to be some limitations, and we gave a very specific recording time at given temperatures and recovery. We really put out there as much information as possible to say, look, in 8K RAW or 8K all eye, you're going to get about 20 minutes of record time to this camera. And that's really one of those things that it's a long take for 8K. I know most people aren't going to shoot a wedding in 8K, at least not right now. I mean, that's a lot of editing that you're going to have to do as you get back into your edit deck. And that's, you want to shoot 8K wedding, have at it. That's a lot of fun. But it's not really rumor. We've put it out there. We've put as much information as we possibly can. And of course, we're always looking at how can we improve things? How can we make things better? What else is needed? What are the customers asking for? So I wouldn't go completely crazy about things. But yeah, we've put it out there and said, this is the situation, and here's how to handle heat and thermal issues with 8K inside a camera this size without active cooling.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think people a lot of the time need to just have better regulation of their expectations. The sense of, this is an incredibly small camera body, all things considered, and it's not going to compete with a $50,000 8K cinema camera.
This also sits as a secondary to your cinema body or a dedicated video camera that you might be working with. So if you're running with a C200 or C300 type product, and you need a small, easy to access type camera that can be less noticeable or more conspicuous, however you want to run and gun with this, it's a good companion to that type of workflow. It's never really been pitched as, quote, the A camera for a movie set. It's just not built for that type, but someone's going to try and do it, and they're probably going to be very successful with these limitations that we've put out there.
Well, it's kind of an ongoing thing with all things within the industry of like, when people ask, what's your dream lens? There's always somebody that's like, I want a 10 to 500 millimeter f1.4.
That weighs 3 pounds.
Right. That weighs 3 pounds and costs
For $100.
$3,000. Right.
Exactly.
There is this level of expectations that people have that just isn't feasible currently. On that front, I also would love to talk about the RF lens mount itself. So the RF lens mount debuted about 2 years ago at this point, correct?
2 years ago was 2018, right? And September, if I remember correctly. Yeah.
Yeah. Time doesn't really exist anymore in the modern world. So I just wanted to double check that to kind of walk through sort of a history talk regarding lens mounts. The Canon EF lens mount debuted in 87.
Right.
And that was sort of to fulfill bringing Canon cameras into sort of the modern age and work with autofocus and different things like that. And that's way before my time as a photographer, but I definitely like recognize that one of the benefits of like Nikon, so to speak, would be that their lens mounts dates back to the 50s. However, the downside to that, of course, is that not all of their lenses had autofocus, not all of their lenses were modernized. And not all of their lenses played well with digital cameras. And it seems like you guys made the jump early to make sure that you had sort of this cohesive lens lineup. And then since that, and especially here in the last 2 years, it seems like the focus has been predominantly on the RF lenses. You guys have had 15 RF lenses come out in the last 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, competitors like Sony has had 10 E-mount lenses. Nikon, I think, has had around 15. I'm not sure. But it seems that you guys have put a lot of space and a lot of attention to the RF lens to try to get that caught up to the EF lenses. Are you guys planning on staying on that production speed of having, 7-8 lenses come out each year?
It's a situation of the chicken or the egg. Which one do you do first? Do you do camera bodies or do you lenses? And we had to come out with a good, strong lens lineup in the beginning. And we haven't let up on that production of new lenses out into the marketplace. And I don't think we're going to let up much. We have a lot that are still planned to come out, and took 30 some odd years for the EF system to reach the capacity that it has, everything from 11 to 24 millimeter lenses all the way to 1200 millimeter lenses that expand a huge amount of versatility when it comes to user selection. Right now, I think in the current market there's like 70 plus lenses that are available that are current lenses, not just lenses that have been around for 50 years or 30 years, but the RF mount and the lenses that we're coming out with, we put out 5. I think 5 was the initial lenses that we put out there, and it was met with lesser expensive fast primes and things like that. So we're working on as much as possible, as quick as possible. But lens production is probably one of the toughest things out there, and how long it takes to develop and create and then produce these lenses.
And, for me, that has been what has slowed me down from jumping into the R system. Is I have a camera bag full of EF mount lenses, and I recognize that there is an adapter for it.
Mm-hmm.
But, I am sort of the purist of like, I think somebody much wiser and smarter than me once told me, like, don't jump into something thinking that the adapter is like the long-term solution. It's sort of the transition solution, and that the lenses will just generally function better connected directly to the camera body. Is there a specific reason why you guys did transition to this new lens mount when developing your mirrorless systems?
Yeah, it was one of those things, like I said in the beginning, that we weren't looking to build a mirrorless system to begin with. We were looking to build a system that would take us beyond and to give the engineers design capabilities that they haven't had before. And when they started putting all of this together, they said, well, if we kept the same mount diameter and change the shorter back focus distance, we can really go beyond what we've been limited by before with even the EF mount, even as versatile as it was. Some of the lenses that you're seeing now that we produced and will be producing in the future are because of this design philosophy of the RF mount. And one of the first lenses we introduced was the 28-70 f2, and it's a hoss of a lens. I mean, it's a 3.5-pound lens by itself, but man, that thing is a prime lens from 28 millimeters all the way to 70 at just about every aperture. So I can imagine what that would look like in the EF mount. I'm not quite sure. I'm not the lens engineer, but I can tell you it probably wouldn't be the size and shape. I don't know. But yeah, the RF system is really going to open up some capabilities that the engineers didn't really have before. And I think that's where they're really going to enjoy designing lenses for what's out there. And one of the interesting quotes like I got when I went to Japan for the initial R launch was the engineers weren't trying to decide what they could produce, is what they wanted to produce, because they could do anything. It's just what would they be able to and have the capacity to put together. So their ability to design is almost unlimited, but they're, we're only so big and can only produce so many lenses per year.
I don't think people realize how long it takes to go from we'd like this lens to we produce this lens.
Yeah, I wish I had, hard numbers to say it was X amount of years, but it's definitely a much more significant time than people would think. It's in the years measurements versus months measurements.
I think that's enough, because I think that's what people don't get. Someone comes out with a lens and I hear people, well, they need to do this to keep up. And I'm, they're doing what they started 2 years ago. It takes time.
Oh yeah. That's from research to design to what's it going to cost to create the thing, to market research of would it be used. And oh my gosh, dude, there's so much behind the creation of a lens. It has to last not only today and meet today's requests, but it's got to last 10, 20 years in the future as to what people are going to do with it.
Yeah, at least 2 or 3 more bodies before that lens is out of production.
And now we're asking for more functionality. We're asking for super silent video autofocus drives and image stabilization that coordinates with the body. I mean, there's so much that's going into a lens design that those guys are much smarter than I am in that engineering department.
The life of these lenses, they can last, decades. I look at it like, I have an 85 millimeter f1.2 that I use regularly. And just the fact that was released 15 years ago, prior to even thinking about what digital cameras are capable of now. I mean, I remember 15 years ago, 3 megapixels, 5 megapixels was like a huge deal. And now we've got cameras that are 10 times that shoot 10 frames a second, that have lightning fast autofocus. So to develop a lens that not only performs well as a standard for now, but is also still a capable lens and a great lens 15, 20 years into the future, has to involve just an immense amount of foresight in planning ahead of time.
And the amount of resolution that we're having to plan these lenses for, that the 85 1.2 from 15 some odd years ago, that really was designed for film. And there was some inkling of digital coming forward, but I'm not sure anyone back then even knew we would be hitting 45, 50 million pixels on a small portable camera such as these. So you really have to think about, what's it going to be like in the future? Everyone kept saying that, all right, 30 is going to be the biggest. I think at one point we said 8 was going to be as big as, anyone would ever need. And that old, quotes from, the early days of digital.
A different manufacturer CEO said 16 is more than anyone can use.
I remember that.
Yeah.
Well, that is, I think, a great stopping point for right now. So we're going to take a quick break. And then when we get back, we're going to talk a little bit more about the RF lenses.
If you only know Lens Rentals from our yelling about cameras on the internet, there's more to the story. We're actually the largest online videography and photography equipment rental house in the entire world. Cameras, lenses, lights, audio, drones, just about anything. Here's how it works. Just go to lensrentals.com and tell us what you need and when you need it. We ship it straight to you in protective cases. You use it for whatever your heart desires, then ship it back to us with the included return label. Next time you need equipment for a shoot, head to lensrentals.com/podcast for a discount on your order. That's lensrentals.com/podcast.
Welcome back. We're here today with Drew MacCallum from Canon, and I have some questions because I am obviously a lens guy. And I think many people know I've spent 18 months waiting to buy into mirrorless. Sold all my SLR gear, unlike Zach. And for me, it's about the lenses, and Canon is kicking some butt with lenses. But there's a really odd thing that's happened. You guys came out with a lens, and for the first time in now 3 years, I bought it. No one would believe it because it's not the sharpest, it's not the coolest, it's not a wide aperture, it's an f11 lens. And the simple reason is it fills a need for me perfectly. I am at the beach right now. I go here once a month. There's a wildlife refuge right behind me. I do not come on vacation to carry all my gear. But I do like to take pictures of wildlife, and the opportunity to have a small lens that I'll actually carry with me when I go on a walk that gives me telephoto reach really is a huge thing for me. So when this lens first was announced, I went, what and why? And after about 2 days, went, wait, I want that. I actually bought it. Haven't bought the camera yet, but I own the lens and rented the camera. But can you talk a little bit about those lenses? Because I think some people are in my boat of I'll never use that. Oh, wait, I think I might.
Yeah, you're many people are in your boat. It's a big boat, Roger. There's a lot of people that like you, they go on vacation and they don't want to carry a 600 millimeter f4 at 8.5 pounds with them, or they can't carry it with them because, that's just not in the purview of the vacation. That some people's not a vacation. That's a seminar, a workshop, or, something that they're going to for work. That is the exact target customer that is looking for the 600 and 800 f11. And when we first saw it, everybody looked at each other around the room and went, F11? Okay, what's this thing look like? What's it going to do? How's it going to perform? And we all, because all we see is on paper, we just see this, diagram and a list of specs on it. And we go, oh, wow. Okay. How much is this is the next question. And we go, oh, okay. So, you were that exact person. You're like, we're going down to Florida. We're down to the Keys. We're going birding for some fun. Or, you know what? I've got some travel plans ahead of me. Or, I talked to a guy who's going up on an Alaskan cruise, hopefully at some point when the cruises come back. And to go out on this cruise with a 600 millimeter, 800 millimeter lens, he's going to be able to photograph those eagles that are way out there that he couldn't get with his 70 to 200. Yeah. And he also didn't want to carry that because he can't fit it in the cabin or on his luggage. So there's a lot of potential for this. And I think your quote earlier about the expectations, I think you're going to be very surprised by the 600 and 800 f11 because they are surprisingly sharp at f11. It's just an amazing little detail in that lens.
This is going to probably get cut, but I'll tell you a real quick story. I bought this so I could take it on this week's trip. And since we had a couple of days, Aaron and I disassembled it because that's what we like to do. Because I'm like, what all's in there? And we enjoyed that very much and put it back together. And I took it home and put it on the camera, and we reversed the lock for the extension switch. Oops. So it's still sitting at home. Yeah, to get that done. But that's what it's perfect for this. So I just think that's the out of the box thinking that I'm really enjoying that you guys are doing now. The 7200 that extended, that was the same thing for me. It's like, wow. And actually, one of your engineers sat with me and showed me that before it was released. And I looked at it and I thought that was it. And I'm like, wait a minute. It does what? And that's just brilliant. And why did nobody do it? And I think that's one of those things that you can do with the new mount and new design and new thinking. It really pumps me up.
Well, and that's always a big question about things like that when we do change to, say, a external zooming lens like the 70 to 200, and people say, well, what about the weather resistance? And I look at them and I go, how many other lenses have external zooming? Or let me rephrase that, how few lenses are internally zooming? Right. And when you look at the 1 to 4, you look at so many lenses that are out there that have that external zoom functionality that are just as weather and dust resistant. It's really not something that should be much of a concern if it's built to those standards as we put out there for L series mounts.
Oh, exactly. And I've taken those apart, and they are really well sealed. But the convenience factor is important, and that's the whole thing with a lot of these lenses is the thinking of that makes it easier to take, that makes it easier to pack, whether it's a primary lens or. In the case of the 7200, I can fit that in because it swishes down so small that it'll make my camera bag. It's more than just the optics that are being thought about. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, and the optics on the 600 and 800, like I said, they're actually more surprising than you would expect. And we always take a look at that and go, all right, how do we need to market this, and what level do we need to push it at for for the end user? Because we know we've got a very a critical user base that they want the best of the best, regardless of price point and everything else. So we try and deliver that, over deliver and things like that when it comes to the lens design. And I think the 6 and 8, once people start getting their hands on them and get out there and play with it, they'll see what it's like to work with longer glass, because most people aren't used to working with a fixed 600 or 800 millimeter lens. So it's a little different in your vision and how you take pictures, because you can't zoom. Right. So you have to compose, you have to plan where the bird's going or the animal's going or whatever it might be that you're chasing. You kind of have to have that awareness around you. You work a little differently working that far out.
And that's a nice segue, because a lot of people never shot 800 at all. And shooting 800, which we're going to be doing handheld with this lens, we all know, maybe braced on a fence or something, is going to require a lot of image stabilization. And can you comment a little bit about the combination of in-body and in-lens stabilization with these telephotos? Because that's a cool thing.
Yeah, so that's one thing where these lenses, the 6 and 8 specifically, are not giving the coordinated image stabilization the same way that our 1:5 and 70-200 and other lenses that are the RF mount. These two lenses, you will have the 5 and 4 stops, respectively, on those lenses, the 600 and 800 in the lens itself. And then you have the body stabilization that's going to give you the 5-axis. But you're really going to look in that 5 and 4 stops realistically, even with that built-in IS. But it does, you'll notice that your ability to hand hold an 800 millimeter lens or 600 millimeter lens, it's the weight that's going to help you. The image stabilization itself is going to help you. When it comes to the other lenses that are combination IS, like the 100 to 500, I think that's 6.5 stops, if I remember correctly, on the combination image stabilization. That thing is, they're working in conjunction together. So the lens compensates for one direction and the in-body compensates for another direction. So those two are actually coordinated together, where the 6 and the 8 aren't coordinated. They're just kind of that separate but equal type functionality.
The 100-500 is an expensive lens, but it's, looking at the specs on it, it's a really good one too. Now I'm very excited about the cameras.
Yeah, there's so much coming, and like I said, we put out the 6 and 8 f11s, and those fit a price point or a marketplace that someone says, you know what, I need to do some long. I want to do some long lens work, but I really don't have the change, or I really don't want to invest in the 100 to 500 because I don't use it that often. I can really justify a 600 at that price point versus a longer lens or a more expensive lens. So there's so many different ways that you can justify what type of lens you need and what your type of work is. So we're trying to hit a lot of those different needs and wants and desires, and it's impossible to do with one lens.
I would love to touch base a little bit. We had kind of gotten into the discussion there at the end about specialty lenses, and certainly the RF 800 f11 and the RF 600 f11. They're very much specialty lenses. I'm a portrait photographer. I personally don't see any use for anything like that, just because of the length and stuff. I would love to talk a little bit more about, how does Canon weigh those two options of like building up both like a base of specialty lenses, as well as kind of focusing a lot of attention on the need to have lenses like the 24 to 70s, the 70 to 200s, just like extremely versatile.
Well, you saw in the beginning when we launched the initial R, we had the 28 to 70, the 50 1.2, the 35 f2, and there was one more. Why can't I come up with the 24 105 f4L? Which that's your go-to kind of. I'll call it the kit lens, but that's almost when I insult kit lenses or whatever. But it's an L series lens that's available to lots of people. And then we quickly were able to put out the trinity of lenses, if you will, the 24-70 2.8, the 70-200 2.8, and now the 15 to 35, all with image stabilization, all 2.8s, which really, Zach, like you, that's probably your go-to 2.8 trinity for weddings and events. I know there's some people that, they want prime. That's what their world is. They shoot primes only, and that's their thing. But when you look at what's out there in the market, most people go for that Trinity 2.8. So we had to quickly come out with that, and then start building into the specialties like the 85-1.2, the 85-1.2 defocus smoothing, which is probably the ultimate specialty lens. But it's a beautiful result when you look at that and you go, God, you know what? I might use this once at a wedding or twice at a wedding, or maybe some people, they're using it all the time. But it's kind of like that 8 to 15 fisheye. You didn't use that at every wedding or every event, but when it did, man, that was the one that everybody remembers that you used in their book.
Yeah, I mean, on regards to that defocus smoothing lens, that was the first lens that I've seen in a really, really long time that I was like really excited about. I've kind of reached the point where my camera bag is filled with a bunch of lenses that I don't use all that often. And I have the 100mm f1.2 macro pretty much permanently attached to my camera these days.
2.8, yeah.
Or yeah.
My brain started going, wait, when did you get a 1.2 macro?
Right.
Who makes that?
Well, onto the lens pitches. No.
Yeah.
The f2.8, and that lens, like I said, is permanently attached to my camera. It's sort of the lens I recommend to everybody that does portrait work. I'm like, it's great for macro. It's great for general portrait work. It's great for, those things. And I have reached this point where, I am a little disenchanted by a lot of new lens announcements and lens releases, just because I sort of have everything that I would need to have to do just sort of the work that I do. And that is why find myself being less excited by the new 24 to 70s, the new 70 to 200s, the new sort of standards. And I'm always finding myself way more interested in sort of those specialty lenses. So do you guys have a team that is looking to sort of create these sort of like hyper specialized lenses that, you don't expect to sell by the truckload per se?
It's all one engineering team, is my understanding in Japan, where the lens team is a lens team, and they kind of go, all right, this is what we're focused on for this period of time. But like we said, with that 28 to 70, that to me is one of those lenses. We're probably not going to sell those by the truckload. They're very, to me, that is a very specialty lens, especially at, I think it's like $3,000 for that lens. That's a specialty lens. And I think what we try and do is say, okay, where do we want to go with the system, and what is needed at this time, and how can we build this, and what other lenses are we producing at this time? There's so many different facets to production, to development, and how we can roll those different lenses out. I don't think there's a specific dedicated plan that says, this is this, and this. Oh, wait, let's throw in a mystery lens out of nowhere. I think they're trying to fill as many necessary lenses as quickly as we can. Those like I said, the 2.8 Trinities. And when we get to that 100 macro that Zach needs, we'll see. We'll find out what they do with it.
Yeah. And since I can pitch these things now, let's make it 1.4. What do you say?
1.4 macro. Yeah, when you go into lenses like that, Zach, especially, we're going to go way back here with that 51.0. There's a technique that you had to work with to get focus exactly where you wanted it. You really needed to be rock solid, and your subject had to be rock solid, because if you sneeze or breathe in just a little bit too much, you're out of focus.
Oh yeah, that thing was a mess, but like a beautiful mess.
It's a beautiful mess, and it takes, like I said, a lot of this takes technique. Even that 200 f2. They take some skill and some practice to really figure out where you're going and how you work with that. And now, if we had a lens like that with, eye focus and everything that we have now of eye detection and tracking, holy smokes. I'm the same person as you guys going, God, I wish this lens could do this, or I wish we make this lens. We're all that camera, geek at some point, whether you're a pro or amateur, you've got some level of, I want this. That'd be amazing.
Well, I'm not the camera person, but the camera lineup is fleshed out really quickly and thoroughly now. Do you see, I guess this is a question both for Drew and for Zach, to me as a photographer, and I'm not really worried about 20 minutes of 8K video, I'm not really seeing anything that I don't have available to me in the Canon RF camera line right now at today's technology. Is there something that you see that you wish you had in a camera, Zach?
No, I mean, in terms of the camera, the R5 is very much likely my next purchase. I've read a half a dozen reviews already. I've watched a number of videos on it, and that camera is sort of everything that I've wanted in a camera for a while now. In terms of the lens lineup, I'm extremely excited about that 85 millimeter macro that you guys do have coming out here soon, if it hasn't been released already.
And we haven't touched base on the 85 macro, which I think is a very important piece to this lineup.
Yeah.
Drew, have you used it very much or been exposed to it a lot?
There's actually might be one sitting on my desk right here as we're talking.
But, I kind of thought you might have.
Yeah. That's kind of one of the ultimate joys of my job is to get to play with these things ahead of time and see how they work, how they're going to be received by the public, and really get to know them pretty intimately. I do love this lens, and I think, Zach, this might be right up your alley as far as what you're looking for in a lightweight 85 millimeter. Is it a 1.2? No, it's f2. And if you're going to see the difference between those two, then you're probably going to want to go for the 1.2. But this is one of those lenses that, man, with the image stabilization on this, the game we play in the office is how low can you go, and how many seconds can you go to hand hold this thing? That sounds pretty absurd, doesn't it, guys?
It really does.
I was going to say, I'm a studio photographer, so I'm usually using 2400 watt second strobe systems and shooting at f18. So
change that around and use that modeling light and see what happens. But that's where you start to push things. Go, how can I do this? What can I work with this? How can I use this a little differently to change what it is that I do, or up what I do, or challenge myself even more with what I want to get out of this? And some of the lenses we're creating now in combination with the bodies. And I think there's so much that we're watching the review sites, and we're watching all these videos and reading the blogs. And, to me, the best review is your own, as far as how this camera is going to work for me at the time and what I need it to do. And we haven't even talked about the EOS R6, because that's going to be another part of the puzzle of which camera body do I go to? Do I have an RP, an R, an R5, an R6? There's several different choices and resolutions and thought processes to go behind this. Which one is it that's going to fulfill what I need it to do?
Yeah, I feel bad for the R6 being announced at the same time as the R5 and just kind of having a lot of its own glory sort of, sitting in the shadow of the R5. But that looks to be a really, really great camera as well.
It's the same image stabilization system, same autofocus system. It's a different sensor, but that's a sensor that essentially came out of the 1DX Mark III. So it's basically a proven sensor that's out there, and what it can do. I think people are going to be extremely surprised as well. And I think there's going to be a lot of people that go, that looks like a pretty good deal right there.
One thing on cameras that's important to me we haven't talked about is dynamic range and ISO function. And I think that needs to be pointed out with these newer cameras too, just at least to mention.
Yeah, the R5 has a totally new 45 megapixel sensor. So this is one of those things where the engineers went to task. And I think what you're going to see in results, and I'm more of one that says the proof isn't in the pudding, it's in the eating. When you start working with these files, you're going to be pleasantly surprised and very happy with, I think, that's just me and how I edit, what you're going to get out of a 45 megapixel sensor. A lot of times people think that the higher the resolution, the less dynamic range you're going to have. And I think this camera is going to prove that opposite.
That's always important to me because I never get exposures right. So I'm always rescuing one end or the other.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Drew. We appreciate your time. We appreciate your insight. I'm going to jokingly say that anybody listening to this, get into those comments and send out those lens suggestions to Drew. He did say he could pass it on to the engineers over in Japan.
I will happily take those and pass those on. That is my job, and I enjoy it thoroughly. So I really do thank you guys for having me on here. This is so much fun, and Roger and Zach, always fun to talk to you guys, whether it's on virtual or in person. I can't wait till our next get together so we can sit down and have some more barbecue or whatever else we get to do.
Well, thanks for taking the time. And if you get a barbecue need, I can FedEx some of that up to you.
Yes,
we
sir.
have good shops here.
Thanks for listening to the Lensrentals podcast. If you want to try out an R5 or any of the newly released RF mount lenses, we've got everything we can get our hands on in stock at lensrentals.com. For any videographers out there, I know we stuck mostly to still photography in this discussion, but we'll be testing and discussing all the video aspects of the R5, including overheating tests and sample footage on the Lensrentals and Lens Pro To Go YouTube channels, so keep an eye out for that. And we will link to those pages in the show notes.
The Lensrentals podcast is a production of Lensrentals.com. If you've got a question or topic you'd like covered on the show, email us at podcast@lensrentals.com or leave us a voicemail at 901-609-LENS. That's 901-609-LENS. If you're enjoying the show, please review us on iTunes and subscribe in your podcast app of choice. Make sure to check the show notes for a link to this week's coupon code, and as always, Roger Cicala will leave you with an inspirational quote.
A happy or sad ending simply depends on where you stop your story. Orson Welles.